freshwater values in the Dunstan Rohe and the recording and process in the Dunstan Rohe and the characteristics that contribute to those values. So we can work out what environmental outcomes we need to deliver to provide for the values you've given us. We'd prefer to be meeting face-to-face. It's always good to get out in the region and have a chat face-to-face. But obviously with the COVID situation, we can't do that. There is a bit of a risk that we'll start infecting people around the region, and that wouldn't be a flash lock. All going to plan, we will be coming to you face-to-face meetings around mid to late 2022, where we have a second tranche of meetings, and Tom, the Pulsmaker from ORC, will explain that shortly. I'll now ask, now I'll give you a bit of an introduction. So we have on the line, as presenters, we have Councillor Forbes, who will speak shortly. We have Tom, the Pulsmaker, who is the team leader, freshwater policy. We have Sandra McIntyre and from Okaha and Maria Bartlett from Te Ao Marama, representing a mana for whenua perspective. And shortly we'll get the mana whenua perspective from Edward Ellison as well. Before we get started, I'll just run through a few logistics around how the Zoom session is going to work. So first of all, you would have seen that the Zoom session is being recorded, and it will go up on ORC's website and the YouTube channel, the ORC YouTube channel, once the meeting's commenced. Would also bear in mind any the fact that it is going to be recorded if you are asking any questions throughout. So the Zoom is set up so that only the person speaking will show up on the screen, or it should be, throughout the presentation. Please make sure you're on mute as we go through, just so the background noise doesn't interfere with the session. And as we're going through the presentation, Tom will be the primary person presenting. We will stop every now and then just to allow for a bit of a Q&A session. So if you would please put any comments into the chat. You'll see a chat down the bottom of the page. And when we get to certain points of the presentation, I will stop. We will have a bit of a Q&A, and if you want to ask a question at that point, just put the wee hand up. So if you go down at the bottom of the screen, there is a reactions button. So if you just press that and put the hand up, then I'll come to you. But also, please feel free to indicate you'd like to have a speak to it when you're putting in the name in the chat. I would just ask you again to put your microphone on silent. You can hear a bit of noise coming through there. Project Manager Rachel Curry is here to help via text message if you're having any trouble with the Zoom, with any of the technology. She is there on, she's put her cell phone details in the chat. If you please get in touch with her, flick her a text if you're having any trouble with the technology. You may have questions or comments that are outside the Land and Water Regional Plan. If the best person to answer that question isn't on this meeting, we will take your details and get back to you. I now invite Councillor Forbes to say a few words.
Nau mai haere mai koutou, ki tēnei kōrero o te rohi, o te wai Māori. So welcome to this discussion from our region and about our fresh water. And I know some of you have been in touch with me to say that we're still talking about what we want out of water, and we know that, but we do need to still really nail down what our values are so we can start working towards them. And I think that's mostly what we'll be having today, but you can always frame your values as questions as well. And there's plenty of time for discussion to be ongoing. So I just want to welcome you and welcome the mahika, te rohi, the Kāi Tahu. It's lovely to have a good presence there of you people, and thank you. And who am I handing over to? The rako goes where, David? Oh, no.
Could you please pass to Edward Ellison to provide a mana whenua perspective?
Kia ora, Ed. Over to you.
Kia ora, Councillor Forbes. Me ke David, ngā mihi kia kōrero, me koutou ngā kaimā taki, koutou e whai ana tēnei kaupapa te pōnei ko Edward Ellison. taku ingoa no Otago. So greetings everyone. Tonight I've got the task of talking for mana whenua in terms of our kaitiaki function and duty regarding the Dunstan Rohe of both the kawarau and the mata'au, significant arms of the water that flows out from our Great Lakes. In a couple of minutes, what I'm going to talk about is the role of what we are seeking, the values, the aspirations we have for our waterways. It's a connection that goes back to the beginnings of time and our traditions, the very source of creation, and the source really where you've heard the term Māori. It really arose from the beginnings of time. Out of darkness came the light, and out of the light came the water, and there was the mating of significant spiritual ancestors, from which the various departmental atua, we call them, or gods, deities, came about. You've heard of Tāne, Tangaroa, Tumataueka, who helped shape, create the land. We had the great migrations of our ancestral walkers come to this land. And so, you know, the names and the traditions they placed on the landscape, how the lakes were created, and how important the water that flowed out of those lakes have been over time, are critical then and now to us. So they carry a Māori from the beginning of time. And our duty as kaitiaki is to protect that, understand that, and ensure we have that connection from now and through for future generations. You hear the term te mana o te wai. Well, because those traditions have such antiquity and imbue our values and what our landscape means to us. And it talks about our whakapapa as well, our various waka, significant ancestors, traditions with the landscape. That imbues our waterways with mana. And so the duty we have as kaitiaki is to look after and understand that aspect of it. But beyond that also, once our mortal ancestors came to the landscape, they utilised the waterways from mountains to the sea for mahika, for the annual seasonal hunting, gathering, fishing, waterfowl. They traversed the landscape on mokahi, on waka. They went inland to get their pounamu, to hunt more when they were there, and gather weka and many other resources. So, you know, it was central to our ancestors' way of being. And our knowledge of the landscape, our knowledge of those practices is captured in names and in those mahika customs and practices. So as much as our language is important to us, so is our mātauranga, which is held within those practices. That has become a difficult practice to continue with deterioration of water quality and quantity and loss of access. So that's another feature of our mahi as kaitiaki, is to rebuild that access, retain, reinvigorate our mahika kai in those customs, because that's a knowledge base and it's an identity that we strongly hold with our landscape. So it's not just water to us, is what I'm saying. It is not just the flow of the water that you might see as it goes down the river. It's important. It has its importance, be it from the top of the mountain to the bottom of the ocean. It's the interconnectedness of our environment, important in many ways. And so that's a duty we hold. And what we bring to this kōrero, and I hope in the short time I've had, I've given you a bit of an overview of that particular section of the mata'au, including the kawarau and the tributaries. I'm not sure how long I've been going, David. How many? Perhaps I should stop for questions.
Kia ora, Edward. Yes, and as we come through, if you have any questions for Edward, we'll pass them on. Do appreciate that. Again, we will stop. Tom de Pulsmaker is about to start the presentation. As we go through, we'll stop after every 1 or 2 slides and just have a bit of a Q&A. So again, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat box, and we'll stop every now and then just to have answer any questions and have a Q&A. Tom, I'll pass to you.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Edward, and thank you, Councillor Forbes. Good evening, kia ora, everyone. My name is Tom de Pulsmaker. I'm team leader Freshwater and Lands, and so I'm part of a bigger team of ORC staff. Many are actually on the Zoom now, who are working on the new Land and Water Regional Plan. I'm just going to bring up the PowerPoint. If that works. That does not seem to work. So we'll try again. Right. Can everybody see that now? Yep. Okay, we'll skip through. Anyway, this part of the presentation, I really want to focus on a few words, a few concepts that may help you. I want to explain them, and it will help you to understand what the purpose is of tonight, why we're talking to you tonight. And also, hopefully it puts you in a better position to participate in our process. So I'll be talking a little bit about our regional plan. What is a regional plan actually? And why do we need one? And why do we need one now? And how do we go about developing one together with iwi and together with you? You've also heard us use the words freshwater management units, Rohe. We talked about the Dunstan Rohe as well. But it's probably good to kind of quickly explain what we mean with those words and show to you the extent of the area that we refer to as Dunstan Rohe. We also want to talk a little bit about what's important to you. That's why we're here, really. We want to know what are your values and the characteristics of those values. But in order to make sure that we've got a shared understanding of those two concepts, I briefly want to explain what we mean with values and what we mean with characteristics. And then finally, I want to actually show you how you can participate in this stage of the consultation by giving you a short demonstration of our online survey tools as well. Any questions at this point? Or? No, good to go. So a land and water regional plan, what is that actually? Like city councils and district councils, they have their district plans. So has ORC, but ORC calls them regional plans. And they both have a different focus, really. District plans often have a focus on managing the urban environment, managing urban development, whereas regional plans, they're more focused on managing the natural environment. So ORC has a number of regional plans. We've got an air plan, and that plan looks after air quality. It manages discharges from wood burners or industrial activities to the air. We've got a coast plan as well that manages the coastal environment and makes sure that whatever we do in that environment doesn't result in a deterioration of the health of the coastal environment. And now we are working on a land and water regional plan. And really what we're trying to do there is to make sure that when we undertake certain activities, such as taking of water, water abstraction, or damming of water, discharges of contaminants to water, that we actually make sure that we look after the health of our rivers, our lakes, our streams, our aquifers, our wetlands. And also when we discharge waste or solid waste to land, that we make sure that we actually look after the soil health longer term as well. So that's really what a land and water regional plan does. We're developing one, and we are working towards getting that process completed by the end of 2023 and notifying it at that time. In plans, we said we have different provisions. We've got objectives, we've got policies, we've got rules and limits. They're all a little bit different. Objectives are basically outcomes. So in our plan, we have a statement that says what we want to see in a certain area within a certain time frame. So that's really an objective. An objective could be something like achieve good water quality throughout the region by a certain date. How we're gonna achieve that objective, that's a policy. So policies can direct us to provide educational tools, non-regulatory support, or achieve those objectives through rules. And rules and limits, they actually tell us what you can do as a permitted activity, subject to some conditions, or what you can't do, or it tells you when you need a resource consent. So that's basically what a regional plan does. Yeah, are there any questions at this point? Why do we need one? Well, in fact, we've got one already. We have a water plan at the moment that is operative, but it is pretty old. It was notified almost 25 years ago in 1998. It's a bit out of date. It's very much a product of its time. So the plan is quite effective in avoiding further degradation, but it also tries to look after existing use rights, and it actually tries as well to maximize the use of our natural resources as well. Today, the community and the government, their expectations have kind of shifted. We're still very much concerned about making sure that there's no environmental degradation, but where we have environmental degradation or degradation of water quality, we actually want to go a step further. So we want to bring back some of the things that we've lost, where a stream or river is degraded. We actually want to make sure that we achieve over time a healthy water body again. So changing expectations, but also new challenges and issues. 25 years ago, climate change was not as big of an issue as it is today. Also, what we've seen in the last 2 decades is urban development and agricultural development at a scale and in certain areas where we didn't think it would occur 25 years ago. So we've got new challenges, new issues, and new expectations. And the result of that is that we've seen in recent years a whole bunch of new legislation coming through, legislation from central government. So our current plan actually doesn't give effect to the new legislation anymore. And in some areas, it is actually inconsistent with that as well. So that's why we need a new plan.
So Tom, just in terms of you have referred to the current water plan, but we're developing a land and water plan now. Can you just explain what the difference between those two planning instruments may be?
Yep. So it's just, we already actually have a plan that manages discharges of waste to land. So we have a land plan in some form already, but that one is even older than the water plan. The idea is to review that one as well, but to bring the waste plan into the water plan. And also, we want to be a little bit more proactive in terms of managing land use to make sure that the adverse effects of the land use on the water resource are properly addressed. Up until today, the plan is at least in part effects-based. So we wait until we see an effect in a water body before a rule kicks in or before we take action. The idea is to plan or to manage land use a little bit more proactive, so that we avoid those spin-off effects on water quality.
Thanks, Tom. We've just got a question here from Nigel Murray. How does the impact on mana whenua's health get recognised in the regional plan's focus that is different from all other residents? And I think we are in part going to cover that question on the next slide. So Nigel, we'll just move on to that. I'm assuming you're referring to the mana of the water rather than human health, but we'll discuss that shortly.
Yeah, thank you, David. Thank you, Nigel. Well, in part, yes, hopefully this covers it in part. I mentioned before we've got a new set of national legislation coming through. A lot of people will think about the National Policy Statement for Freshwater Management, which came through in 2020, together with an NES, a National Environmental Standard for Freshwater as well. One of the fundamental concepts that was not introduced, it was actually introduced earlier, but one of the fundamental concepts that was very much embedded in that new legislation was Te Mana o Te Wai. And Te Mana o Te Wai really means that we've got to look after the health of the water body first. It's like it's stated there, it's a new fundamental concept, and it needs to trickle through in every decision that we make around fresh water management. I would go a little bit further and say that it's actually a shared responsibility. It is not just an obligation on central government or on regional councils. It's actually a responsibility for all New Zealanders to look after the health of fresh water. So how the NPS or how legislation has tried to embody that in the planning instruments is by applying a hierarchy of obligations. And you can see on this slide how the hierarchy works. What it means that if we make a decision on fresh water, we've got to make sure at all times that we look after the health of water bodies and their associated ecosystems. It's only when we achieve that we can start addressing the second priority. And the second priority is looking after the health needs of people. So that means the provision of drinking water or the use of water for hygiene purposes. The third priority only kicks in or can only be addressed once you make sure that the first and the second one are achieved. So that is a fundamental concept that is in the new central government legislation, but it is something that we need to have in our new plan as well. So that's the key thing that is missing from the current plan and that will need to go into this new plan.
Thanks, Tom. Nigel, does that answer your question?
Hi, David. Thanks for that. In part, I'm trying to formulate the question to be clear. So let me stick it in the text, in the chat, and then we can look at it.
Thanks, Nigel. And for some of these questions, they might be quite a specific discussion, and we can have that discussion at the end as well.
Yep.
Thank you, Nigel. Appreciate that.
Shall we move on?
Yep.
Yep. So how are we doing this? How are we developing this new plan? Well, we're partnering with iwi, which means that Sandra and Maria, who are on the Zoom chat today, they'll be writing the plan physically with us. We'll be partnering up in the development of that new plan. We'll also be building on consultation that has been undertaken in the past. Over the last couple of years, we've consulted on management regimes for the Arrow and the Cardrona. So we'll carry that through into the development of the new plan. We've also undertaken consultation in 2020 on the RPS. So we'll still be building on whatever feedback we got then. But we'll also be collating new and existing technical information. So that will be a mixture of technical information on hydrology, ecology, economics, but also cultural values. And then we'll be engaging with the communities and whānau to better understand their values and how they want the environment to look like. So that's at a very high level what we're proposing to do. But you're probably wondering, like, how is this going to work? What's the process and what are the different steps? And where does the process start? The process has actually started about 3 years ago. In April 2019, the Regional Council decided to split up the region into freshwater management units, or FMUs, and Rohe. So that was something new. Up until then, plans often managed water by setting rules that applied mostly across the region. The new legislation that has come through basically encourages councils to be a little bit more specific and a little bit more bespoke when it comes to managing freshwater bodies. They basically say you tailor your rules and your objectives and your policies to the requirements of a specific area. So what we've done is we split up the region into 5 FMUs. In some cases, that is a single catchment. For example, the Tairi is a single catchment and it's 1 FMU. In other cases, it's a collection of catchments that are similar in terms of their hydrological conditions or socioeconomic circumstances. So we've got 5. Like I said, the Tairi is 1. We've got 1 for North Otago. The Catlins is 1. 1 FMU for the Dunedin and surrounding coast area. And then we have a very big one called the Clutha-Mata'ao FMU. Like I said, it's very big. It is in fact so big that we think it's too big to manage as 1 FMU. So we split it up into smaller subunits or sub-FMUs, which we call Rohe. And the Dunstan Rohe is one of those 5. So once we did that, we started working on freshwater visions. And those freshwater visions are now, they actually have, we've built some and we built them into our proposed RPS. A freshwater vision is like a statement that says what you want to achieve for a specific FMU or Rohe. And I'll bring up the freshwater or a summary of the freshwater vision, the proposed one, for the Dunstan Rohe later on. But like I said, they are pretty high level. So what we're doing now is actually we're trying to refine them. I can probably best explain it by giving you an example. A freshwater vision might have a statement that says, provide good recreational opportunities by 2050, something like that. What we want to know now is what type of recreational opportunities you want to see. Is it about swimming? Is it about fishing? Or is it about non-contact recreation, such as walking along riversides or just sightseeing? That is what we call a value. So fishing is a value, swimming can be a value. We're also interested in the characteristics of a value. And what we mean with that is what actually makes that fishing experience good? Is it the size of the fish? Is it the fact that there's good water quality? Is it the surrounding environment? Is it the number of fish? So those are characteristics. So that is actually what we're trying to find out from you today and in the next, in the coming weeks when you'll be filling out the survey. So that's where we are at the moment. Once we've got a good understanding of what your values are and the characteristics that you attach to them, and how you rate the state of those values, then we'll start developing outcomes. And an outcome says what you want to see for that value in the future. An outcome is a narrative, so it's a written statement, which is good because it's easy to understand. But the problem with written statements is that they are very difficult to measure. A statement such as good water quality can be interpreted in different ways by different people. To avoid that problem, which was a problem that was very common for older plans, what we're trying to do now is set target attribute stage, which are actually measurable indicators for the outcome. So when we say we want to see good water quality that allows you to swim, we will set an attribute state for example, E. coli. And we'll set a threshold above which the E. coli values should not go. So that's what an attribute, a target attribute state is. And then the next step is actually coming up with actions and rules and limits to achieve that. And so in the next phases of consultation, which will be from the middle of the year up until the end of this year, we will be consulting on those outcomes, target attribute states, and the limits and rules to achieve these. So this is what this slide actually shows. So we're
Sorry, just before you kick on there, Tom, Nigel's come back with a bit more clarification on his question. Maria and or Sandra, I imagine you've probably seen the question. Would you just like to respond?
Yeah, I'm just happy to help with that. Also want to acknowledge Waitahu ki Murihiku whānau, and well, first of all, I just want to acknowledge all the whānau who are on the call representing Kāi Tahu ki Otago. It's really great to see you, and just apologies for our mana whenua reach this evening. It's a bit of a demanding schedule this week. So what I just wanted to note was that I think Nigel's question was around how is the relationship going to be reflected with mana whenua through the region.
Sorry, Maria, if you just can, Pete, can you please put your microphone on mute? Cheers.
Yeah.
Thanks, Maria.
So I just want to note that similar exercises happening over the border in Southland, and this aspect that we're talking about here, the working through values and characteristics and outcomes and target attribute states, we're all doing that just over the border as well. And so the way I would say it, Nigel, is that it's a little bit of a reframing of your question. It's more like, if you're bringing mātauranga to these questions, you end up asking different questions, and you also end up focusing on additional characteristics or indicators. So I think it's more a bringing together than a either or, is what I would say. It's not and that when you bring those things together, it's for everybody's benefit. So what I would say is that the values and characteristics, when you bring Waitahu indicators of health into the picture, do round out what is otherwise what you might think of as classic environmental science, I guess. So that's how it'll translate through to the regional plan. There'll be a specific visible thread coming through. Yeah, but they come together in support of the whole.
And I can add that too, in terms of add to that a little bit as well. Nigel, I think you sort of pointed in your question towards the fact that the Te Mana o Te Wai priorities have separate layers in them, and you've pointed to the fact that David's presentation talked about the integral connection between mana whenua and the land and the water. What that means for us in terms of how you translate it into the plan is that there are aspects of that mana whenua relationship and connection that need to be fed through each of those three layers of Te Mana o Te Wai. It's not a matter of sort of putting putting mana whenua values in one part of it, but as Maria's indicated, they need to sort of feed through all the different parts of it. Edward, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Yes,
Thank you. Sorry.
Sorry. Essentially, it's related to Māori and te mana. Te mana, it's really holistic. It's a holistic approach to water and interconnectedness, and not a lot of separation between people and water. So it's trying to interpret those values in the way we manage set rules for water. And I think it's a hurdle to a degree that in the end should result in better outcomes, I think, for our water. And
Thank you, Edward. Sorry. Bridget has asked a question. Can Maria or Sandra, can you please give an example of a Kāi Tahu health indicator that would be assimilated into general standard signs?
I don't really want to pluck one out of the air. There's a report that I can share where a number of Kāi Tahu indicators of health are captured, and there's quite a few, and it shows also the overlap where they link through, for instance, to numeric attributes and work that, as I say, has been done over the border. So we can definitely share that to give a bit of an idea about how the things fit together. Yeah, it's probably easier than just probably trying to dream one up on the spot. Yeah, thanks though for asking the question. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Maria. Tom, just a few questions in terms of the process.
Yep.
2 questions in terms of the regional policy statement and how that's had an impact. Firstly, Nigel's got a question around the freshwater management units and the Rohe lines. How were those drawn, and when did the community get to have a say on those?
Yep, happy to answer that. So in 2019, we worked together with iwi, with Maria and Sandra, to come up with a proposal for delineating freshwater management units and Rohe. Then that proposal was actually taken into the proposed RPS. So when we, prior to the notification of the RPS, ORC did a bit of a roadshow, and they talked to the community about freshwater management units and how their boundaries were established, and as well as the proposed vision for them. So based on that feedback, or that was used to put freshwater management units boundaries and visions in the RPS, and that was open to submissions as well. Now, because it's in the RPS and it's a different process, we can no longer influence the boundaries or the vision through the land and water plan process. But that was a requirement under the NPS. So we needed to set freshwater visions under the NPS in our regional policy statement, not in the land and water plan. There is an advantage. I mean, it's disadvantage. The disadvantage of having it split is that you've got to be involved in 2 processes that don't necessarily track at the same time. But having them in the RPS, the boundaries and the vision, means that we've got some certainty what we work with in the land and water plan process.
Thank you, Tom. And just one sort of related question. Say I attended one of the freshwater vision meetings end of 2021, and you're about to discuss the Dunstan Rohe vision, but how would I see that coming through both the regional policy statement and also through this process? So if I sat down and talked about what I valued out of the Dunstan Rohe through the through the RPS freshwater visions process. How would I see that now?
Yeah, so we'll bring up the vision in one of the next slides, or a summary of that. Like I said before, the vision is, once the vision is set, we need to give effect to that in our land and water plan. So we cannot be inconsistent with that in the plan, but it's high level and it's incomplete in terms of the values that addresses it. It doesn't address all the values. So this process kind of complements it in that sense. And it also, provides a little bit more detail, a little bit more direction for us. I don't know if hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you, Tom. It does. It's not just another question. How will the connections between the Rohe and FMU be balanced and not have negative influences on each other, particularly I imagine with these connected water bodies?
Yeah.
And I'll expand upon that question with North Otago as well, with the boundary with ECAN. It's not an impact with the Dunstan Rohe specifically, but it does impact the plan and the regional provisions.
Yeah. Basically, we'll have the plan will be a mixture of provisions that address management at an FMU or Rohe scale and region-wide provisions. And it is the task of the region-wide provisions and the objectives that we set at that level to make sure that the whole system is considered in a holistic manner and that we don't pick winners or losers. Specifically, when it comes to the Clutha Mata'ao, because a lot of people will probably think, how can you split up the Clutha Mata'ao into 5 separate Rohes? In that case, we've still have it as one FMU as well, overarching FMU. And I would anticipate we'll set some provisions at an overarching level to make sure that the different components of the Clutha system talk to each other. And and that is actually coming true in the vision as well. I'll give you an example of that later on.
Cool, thanks, Tom. We've got a couple of questions relating to the next slide. So if you just move on to that, we can answer some questions in.
Yep. Sure why it's not. And just at this point, it refuses to. See if this works. Yeah. So this sets out the different consultation steps, really. We're at step 1 now, confirming the values and discussing their characteristics. We'll be back later in the year to present and discuss environmental outcomes and management options to achieve those. And then we'll come back with a preferred management option that will be late this year or at the latest early next year. And then the 4th stage, that is actually referring to the formal submission process, really, after we notify the plan.
Thanks, Tom. And a couple of questions relating to the information we're collecting and what we will be doing with it. So Bridget has asked what work we have programmed or planned for the Dunstan Rohe specifically. I guess we're talking the economics, the science, and the policy.
Yeah. Probably from, perhaps David, you can probably best address the economics. Maybe somebody from science can discuss the scientific, the hydrological, and the ecological work.
I can just touch on the economics if you like.
Yeah.
Now. So there are, Bridget, there are a couple of work programs that may be of interest to you, and we can touch base afterwards if you like, or there will be some information on the website. The first is the Farmer Grower Project, where we're working with industry good bodies to establish a base of information to enable us to assess the impacts of policy decisions on specific land use types. The second is a Catchment Stories project, where we're getting in touch. We're inviting catchment groups, resource users, communities to get in touch with us, tell us what works and what does not, and the work they're doing on the ground, including a bit of a narrative around the work they're doing and what benefit is providing. We're doing some work around the Māori economy, working with Okaha and Te Ao Marama on that, and regional economic analysis. When it comes to the end of the planning process, there will be a regional economic analysis, a base of information around socio-economic analysis. So it's not just chuck some numbers on the page. It's a socio-economic analysis, and I understand quite a few people do get concerned about the fact that the impacts on not just individual land uses, but also the wider impacts on rural communities, etc., aren't covered. Our intention is to do that through that broad narrative as well. Does someone from the science team want to just give a quick overview of the science program?
If not, yes,
yeah, I think I can pitch in. I'm Sammy from the science team. I will start that we have programs to put some leg buoys on the big legs. I know it's not part of this particular Rohe, but it's part of the FMU, and that's where the research, the research is starting from. And then we are also working on the fish passage and the habitat modeling and the rivers. And we're also there is a huge program which also includes wetlands mapping and delineation in the catchments. And yeah, so I think these are all the three big programs that I can touch base on. Yeah.
Thanks, Sammy. And I think it's important to note that as we develop this information, it'll be put on the council website, particularly the Dunstan webpage. So two things I would ask you to do, if you could please sign up for the email updates when you complete the survey. And also if you can just keep a track of the information as it comes up on the Dunstan webpage as we move through this process. A related, Sammy, is whether there will be a monitoring buoy on Lake Dunstan.
Yeah, that's also there is a proposal for that. It's not in the in this upcoming plan that we have. There will be 3 buoys coming on Lake Wanaka, Wakatipu, and Hawea. So that's the next plan, but there will be a buoy on Lake Dunstan in the near future, which is also in discussion. And that will be also included in the SUE program, which is State of the Environment.
Thanks, Sammy. Just in terms of that feedback process, Tom, I've got a couple of questions. Point from King Gillespie around future proposals that are underway for water storage. And I guess there's also a related question around irrigation schemes and catchment groups who have done a lot of work themselves. We've got a lot of information, science, technical, economic. How will that be considered as we move through this process?
Well, probably, the speaker's on, yeah. Probably, I mean, the first step would be to basically talk to those groups and see what's out there. How well we can consider that information will in part depend on the timing as to when, when that exchange can happen as well. So the earlier that exchange happens, the better, I think, in terms of incorporating it. In terms of, how we should deal with proposed storage or water storage proposals. I think it's important to come up with an approach that works in terms of water storage that works across the region or across the Rohe or FMU. Personally, I find there's always a little bit of a danger to kind of tailor provisions in a plan to one particular proposal, especially when that proposal falls through or when it changes over time. I think, again, it brings us back to the hierarchy of obligations, making sure as well that we don't compromise on the health of the environment. But water storage is important. It is important in the context of climate change. It is important in the context of hydroelectricity generation as well. So it is definitely something that we need to address in the new Land and Water Plan.
Thanks, Tom. And just in terms of this process here, if for instance, people are aware of a base of information, they can provide it through the survey.
Yeah.
So Kelly has a question. Are Ngāi Tahu health indicators likely to be linked to the target attribute states? Maria, would you mind picking that up, please?
I would just, thanks for the question, Kelly. It's a good one. I think what we would understand is, or how we've been thinking about community, is that community includes iwi. So the important thing is for that it's clear that we can pull together these indicators and give a really good grounding, I guess, for the iwi part of that picture, and that the council is going to have to work with all of the information that it has to set those target attribute states. So it would be wrong to think, for instance, that it's iwi setting those states. It's better to think more around those states get set more inclusively when the council has the right information coming forward, or the supporting information coming forward from iwi. So that's what we're trying to do. Why I was saying that we're putting a lot of work into this. I think it's been an area of practice that has been underdeveloped over time, so that although there's been a lot of work put in by Ngāi Tahu whānau over the last 20-25 years to build this up to a point where we actually can, at this time in history, do this well. So we're quite looking forward to this part of it. And as I said, it'll get more visible as we go through this process, but the council's job is to bring it all together. So yeah, I hope that helps.
Thanks, Maria. Jenny's just asked if he's in the she's in the right meeting because they are in the Maniatoto. Tom, you're about to explain the Dunstan Rohe, so probably move on.
Yeah, probably not the right meeting, but I think that you will get, hopefully, some out of this meeting. The meeting that we have installed for the Maniatoto, which is in the Tari FMU, is coming up in 3 weeks. But a lot of the things that we will cover off then, we have covered off now as well. So it will be very similar in terms of its setup and in terms of the matters that we're discussing right now.
Cheers, Tom. Well, thanks for those questions. Please keep them coming through. I think we'll move on to the next one.
Yes. Sorry, I've got too many screens open. Right, the Dunstan Rohe. Like I said, the boundaries, they are in the proposed RPS. So we cannot influence them through this process. They might not, some FMU boundaries might change through the hearing process for the RPS, but I don't think there were any submissions on this boundary. So I think this boundary is likely to stay as it is now. And as you can see, the Dunstan Rohe, basically, the best way to describe it is it drains the Clutha Mata Ao and Kawarau catchment areas from the outlets of lakes Whakatipu, Wanaka, and Hawea up to the Clyde Dam. So it includes the Arrow catchment, Shotover catchment, the Nevis River, Cadrona catchment, Lindis, Hawea Flat area, and then the large part of the Upper Clutha up to Clyde. I talked before about the long-term vision that is in the proposed RPS, and this is a summary of that vision. The actual vision has quite a few more words in it, but I've tried to kind of distill the most the most important aspects of it. And we talked previously about making sure that by splitting up FMUs and by splitting up the region, we don't lose sight of the fact that the environment is actually interconnected. The first bullet point, a single connected system, actually refers to the fact that the whole Clutha Mata Ao is a connected system, and that the water that is actually entering the Dunstan Rohe comes from another Rohe in a pretty pure form, something that we need to be mindful of when we make decisions around water quality in this in the Dunstan Rohe. Relationship of Kāi Tahu is important as well. Sustain and restore natural form and function. And this is a good example of a statement in the vision that probably could benefit from having further input from you through this process. What do we mean with natural form and function? Is it about the clarity of the water? Is it about river flows? Is it about the riparian margins, or a combination of those things? Easy migration of indigenous species as well as in the vision. Safety for human contact. Takes from bigger rivers or groundwater are preferred to takes from smaller streams, and that is something very important for this Rohe, because what we see is a lot of the threatened species, the high ecological values, are often located in those smaller streams. So we've got to look after them. And then also the fact that the Clutha Mata Ao is important for hydroelectricity generation. So just to give you a bit of a flavor of that, you see in the background 2045, and that is the time frame for achieving the vision, or the proposed vision.
So Tom, just why would the Clutha Hydro electricity generation scheme be afforded such a status in the vision?
It's not just awarded a high status in the vision, it's actually awarded a high status in the NPS FM as well. Yeah, the vision was built from community input. I was not directly involved in that, but it was built from community input as well as iwi input. So it is very likely that a lot of people have considered that to be an important value.
Thank you, Tom. Also a question from Ken, whether the Ida Valley is part of the Dunstan Rohe.
The Ida Valley is actually part of the Manaharakia Rohe, as it drains into the Manaharakia, yeah, which is one of the 5 Rohe.
Cool. Thanks, Tom. Sandra, would you just mind adding to that last discussion on the freshwater vision?
Sure. Yeah, and I was just going to comment briefly on that. I guess the prominence given to the Clutha Hydro scheme, as Tom said, the National Policy Statement for Freshwater Management specifically gives a a significant status to the Clutha and Waitaki systems because of their importance in the national hydroelectric system. I think what a challenge for us is in dealing with the planning for the Clutha Mata'o FMU, and in particular this part of it, is how we recognise that national direction, which we have to give effect to, while also dealing with the demands of Te Mana o Te Wai and ensuring that the river is able to be well and healthy. And as you'll see, there is another part of that vision that talks about restoring the natural form and function of the river to the extent that we can. So that's looking at how we can marry those things together is going to be one of the challenges that is facing us in terms of this part of the river.
Thanks, Sandra. On to the next one, Tom.
Right, we're nearing the end. So how can you have a say? Unfortunately, we cannot meet in person. We hope that the situation in terms of traffic light system will allow us to consult later on, or the COVID situation. But at the moment, we are consulting primarily online. So you can talk to us during the meeting. You can also complete an online survey. Now, we appreciate that not everybody in the region might have access to internet or good internet. So you can also request a hard copy of the survey. You can mark your areas of significance. And what we mean by that is areas where you think are important values on our online waterways map. And even though I'm very technologically challenged, I will attempt to take you through the survey just to kind of give you a short demonstration.
So, Tom, just before we kick into that, we've got some questions around where the Ida Valleys and Manuhea fit in terms of the Rohe.
Yes. So the Manuhea and the Ida Valley form one Rohe, the Manuhea Rohe. Because we over the years, we have been consulting with the Manuhea community on setting minimum flows and a management regime. We've been engaging with them for quite a number of years now. So what we have landed on through that process will be taken forward into the new land and water plan. But we're not redoing, or we're not setting up a new Rohe process for the Manuhea. We're just going to build on the results of the process that we closed off last year.
Thanks, Tom. Hopefully that answers the question. I didn't know the answer myself, so thank you for that. So Tom, you're just going to take us through the survey.
Yes. Sorry, I've got to. Right. So if I'm not sure, it's not coming up. Can you see the survey now, or?
Yes, we can.
You can? Okay, so if you click one of the links, if you click the link on the slide, you'll arrive at the Your Say page, which is basically a web page on our website dedicated to consultations for the Land and Water Regional Plan. At the start, there is a little bit of introductory text that explains what we're doing and why we're doing it. And then if you scroll down, you've got two tabs, Survey and Pin Your Interest. So those are the key tabs that steer you towards the online consultation tools. Below that, we also have a map that shows the different FMUs, and you can zoom in on that map to kind of see specifically or in greater detail the boundaries of the different FMUs. I'm going to click survey now, and that brings you to the survey page. Again, some introductory text and an explanation of how to use the survey, but I'm going to take you quickly through it. If you scroll down, if you're not quite sure whether you're actually, or if you're not quite sure in which Rohe or FMU you are living, you can actually here enter your address. And I'll give an example. Oh, sorry. And it shows you which FMU you're in. Also has a map that shows you exactly where you are within that FMU. If you scroll down, you actually get to the actual survey. You can choose the FMU you want to comment on, even though this meeting was dedicated to the Dunstan Rohe. You can comment on the Dunstan Rohe, but you can actually also comment on other FMUs. There's only one thing I've got to emphasize. You can only do the survey for one FMU at a time. So if you want to do the survey for the Dunedin coast and the Dunstan Rohe, you've got to go through the survey twice.
So Tom, just on that then, the surveys themselves are closing and opening at different dates, aren't they?
Yes. We have, I think, maybe Rachel, can you answer that one? Do you have a...
Kia ora everybody. Yes, I can. I'll just turn my video on as well. So the meetings that we're holding this week, the survey will then be open for a month through till the 28th of March. And then the meetings that we're holding the week after next, the survey for that will then be open for a month until the 14th of April. So we're giving 4 weeks for each group, each 3 meetings, to then be able to use the online tools that we've had to build to get your feedback.
Yeah. So this week we've got Dunstan Rohe, Lower Clutha Rohe meeting is tomorrow, and the Roxburgh Rohe is on Wednesday, I believe. So those ones will be open. I'm going to stick with the Dunstan Rohe for now. And then under the second question asks you, select the things that matter to you. And what we really mean there is select the values that matter to you. Now you can click on any of these values. They're all different values. But bear in mind, the more you click, the more values you click, the longer the survey becomes. But I'll just click on, for example, water quality. I'll click water quality. As I said, you can click other ones as well. Then you get presented a number of questions relating to water quality. There's a wee explanatory statement underneath the question that basically explains what we mean with water quality. We do the same with things with values such as natural character or threatened species, just to kind of explain some more of those technical terms. For water quality, we have listed a few characteristics, and what we really ask you there is tell us which characteristics of water quality are important to you. Is it clarity of water that you care about, the color of water, water smell, or risk of getting sick? So you can click yes or no. And then in the next question, you can rate the state or the condition of that characteristic from either being very bad to very good. And then we also ask you whether there are any other important characteristics you can think of. For example, we've listed clarity of water, color, water smell, but you might think that, for example, the presence of watercress could be an indicator or a characteristic of good water quality. So you can add that in the we comment box under question 5. And then at the end of the survey, we have a number of questions that relate to your age, where you come from, just to get a better understanding of what target audience we actually are reaching through this survey. It's very valuable for us in the future when we design our consultation processes as well. So as you can see here, it's pretty short, but like I said before, the more values you click, the longer the survey takes. Once you've done the survey, you can submit it. And that should bring you, oops, sorry. That should bring you to the online interactive map. This is the map. So you can zoom in on certain areas. You can see the FMU boundaries. If you have a specific value that is linked to a certain location within the Dunstan Rohe, what you do is click the plus in to the left of your web page, and you'll see a drop-down box with different icons or different colored icons for different values. And you can drag one of these to the location of interest. So you can drag as many icons as you wish for as many values as you wish onto the map, and they stay registered there. When you drag one, you can add a comment here in the comment box, or you can also add an image. So if you've got any photos that you want to share with us, feel free to upload them. And you can also enter a name. So it doesn't have to be your own name. You can put in alias. The survey, by the way, is anonymous. So, and then once you've done that, you just click submit and it's registered. So that's a short introduction to the survey. Any questions, or hope that was clear?
So Tom, I think the survey done a good job of walking through the survey. We've just got a large amount of questions around the manahia care process.
Yeah.
For example, adoption of staff recommendation. What further say people will have over both the manahia care itself and also the regional provisions, and consultation over the manahia care more generally. Just a quick summary, I think, in terms of the process as it sits with the Land and Water Revision Plan.
Yeah. So at the moment, we're just doing some further technical work, and it's my understanding that we'll be able to shore that up pretty soon. Just to confirm as to where we landed in terms of the minimum flow recommendations, whether that is based on good technical information. At this point, we are not anticipating to do any further consultation with the Māori Rohe community. There's a number of reasons for that. One is we've got a very short time frame to develop the plan. The other reason is we have been consulting over the last couple of years. We also want to avoid consultation fatigue, which I think is kind of a risk in that case as well. When we notify the plan, it is not the end of the line as well. There are opportunities through the submission process as well for people to have an input in the flow regime or the management regime for the Māori Kia Rohe.
Thanks, Tom. Chris, I'll pass your question on to Tom shortly. We can also have an offline discussion. Claire Mulholland has made a statement that time frame should not be a limit to consultation. Tom, could you please explain why we're up against a time frame?
Yep. So all regional councils have a set time frame by which they have to notify regional plans that give effect to national legislation. Our time frame is a result of an agreement of council with the minister. Yeah, so that's the time frame we're working towards.
Thanks, Tom. Just picking up the Māori Kia again, Jenny has asked, the Māori Kia consultation was not about the land and water plan. What input do people concerned about the Māori Kia have to the land and water regional plan, including the Māori Kia related provisions?
Most of the this FMU process is primarily focused on freshwater management. If you go through the survey as well, most of the questions relate to freshwater management. The land and water provisions, the provisions for managing land, a lot of those will be in the region-wide provisions, and we're currently working on a process to see how we can best consult on those.
Thanks, Tom. And I just, Jenny's just noting that they want to have input on the land and water regional plan for the Ida Valley and the Poolburn. Yep. Ken has asked whether there is the opportunity to provide feedback distinguish between indigenous fish species and introduced.
Yeah. I believe the survey does have, in a number of places, questions around, introduced species versus native species. So if you have a preference for one, you can state that through the survey.
Thanks, Tom. And that will be counted as we go through the process assessing community feedback as well.
It's not a numbers game as well. I must say, we're trying to figure out what the community at large thinks about the state of a certain resource. But in the development of the plan, there are other factors that need to be considered. We've got input from iwi as well. We also still have to make sure that we meet our obligations, give effect to the NPSFM. So if the community steers us in a direction that we cannot go under the NPSFM, we've got to correct it. Yeah. So it's an important input, but not the only input.
Thanks, Tom. And just walking back through the process you were discussing previously, we draft up a plan, we put it out for consultation. What is the opportunity to provide feedback at that point? So just explaining the resource management process. Once we've been through the process and identified environmental outcomes, how do people provide feedback on the land and water regional plan as a package?
As a package, it will be through the through the submission stage.
Cool, thank you. Well, I think we'd indicated that we were going to take up about an hour and a half of your time, and I think we're now very close to that. So can you just move on to the next slide, please, Tom? Was that the close?
Yep.
So while Tom's doing that, so the online survey for the Dunstan Rohe closes on 28 March. The surveys for the other freshwater management units in Rohe, as we were explaining before, will close at different points. And obviously there are different Zoom calls for those, or Zoom meetings for those ephemeral Rohe. Again, if you suffer from poor connectivity or just want to fill things on in paper, please email our customer services team, and that information is up on the website. Information again on the Dunstan Rohe is constantly being updated, including economic assessments and additional science. And please, again, if you're going through the survey and would like to stay in touch, please provide your contact details. As discussed, we will be in touch with you again, ideally in person, in the second half of 2022, to come and put some preferred management options on the table and really have a more detailed discussion around those environmental outcomes and how we propose to get there. So are there any further questions on the process? So Jenny has got a comment here. She can't understand why ORC is not consulting about the Land and Water Regional Plan with all relevant people. The Manihira Care process was a completely separate process. Do you just want to explain, sort of go through those processes, how they work together, Tom, please? Manihira Care and the Land and Water Regional Plan.
Yeah, look, I acknowledge that the Manihira Care process was started up, I think it was in 2017 that we tried to, because we tried to start it up a bit earlier before that as well. But in 2017, we did a reset, and we actually started from scratch again, asking people about their values, things that were important. So we did this step with the Manihira Care some time ago. I acknowledge as well that the NPSFM has changed since then. But as we went through the Manihira Care process, I believe and I hope that the message was conveyed that we were going to use the outcomes of that process to build a component of a Rohe component of the Manihira, Rohe component in the new Land and Water Plan.
Thanks, Tom. I think we've pretty much exhausted that Manihira Care discussion. We can certainly have a further discussion with some of those people who are concerned about the process, but we'll now move on. I'll hand to Councillor Forbes if you just want to provide some closing words, please.
I'd like to thank everybody for coming along and for putting time into this, and I hope there is some clear directions. There's clearly some questions that we need to answer as ORC and around the Manihira Care, and to make sure, Chris Arbuckle, I note your comments about we have to consult everybody. And so I believe there's something to be answered there as well. So I guess that will happen, and you do need to be able to contribute, and I think you can contribute anyway. Of course you can, and that's worth doing. I do hope people will engage with that survey and get into it, and call somebody if you have any troubles with it. It looks relatively complex to navigate around, but I'm sure you'll be able to do that perfectly well. I don't feel that there was a lot of time here today to answer some questions. I think that we've mostly been about process rather than really actually engaging around the values of the river, and that may be a Zoom thing. It may be that we haven't been able to do that fully, not being together in a room, and that's always difficult. And of course, it's not fully our skill set yet to manage sorts of consultations online. And I may have the wrong end of the stick. Maybe this is exactly what people expected, but I'll leave that with you to think about, and to think about how you will consult. But I'm absolutely sure that we want to hear from you as much about as we can, and I certainly do, but I know our staff do too. And so thank you to the staff. I don't know if there's somebody from Kāi Tahu that want to say anything in closing, but that's my closing words, and I really do look forward to hearing from people and for this continuing on. And thank you very much to our team. There's a lot of you here, and I know it's a huge, huge job, and there's not a lot of time to do it, so I totally respect that. Kia ora.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll shortly pass to Edward Allison. What I would say that it is quite a structured process. So in terms of if you attended the Freshwater Vision feedback process in late 2021, there was quite a high level discussion. So this is now quite a structured process because we're narrowing down those freshwater visions into a point where we can suddenly come back to the community with those management outcomes, environmental options and management outcomes. So as frustrating as it may be, and it is part of the limited discussion, is the fact that we're having this online. Again, looking forward to having those community meetings in the second half of 2022. But it is, I appreciate it certainly can be frustrating, feel constrained, but that is part of the process. Edward, would you mind just closing the meeting, please?
Kia ora, Dave, koutou katoa, thank you. And thanks everyone. It's been a good evening, good discussion, and we've got a few more to go. But I will close our meeting and hope you all have a good night. Nō reira, kia tau, kia tātou katoa, te ata whai tō tātou ariki a hukraiti, me te aroha o te atua, me te whiwhinga tahitanga, ki te wairua tapu ake ake, āmene. Pomari e.
Kia ora, Edward. Staff will be sticking around for 5 or 10 minutes after this meeting, if you do want to stay and have a bit of a chat. I would say that in terms of some of these processes, we've probably reached as much information or much of the discussion as we can at this point. But please stick around if you do want to have a more detailed discussion. Probably only for 5 minutes. We've sort of had a long meeting as it is, but do thank you very, very much for attending. I'm sure you could find better things to do on a Monday night, so it is really appreciated. And please provide feedback and encourage your friends, whānau, and community to provide feedback to that process as well. Kia ora. I've just made a comment in the chat box. If you are keen to ask any questions or provide any thoughts, please put in the chat box, but also use that hand up reaction at the bottom of the screen there. So if you have any questions, please do so. The audience is narrowed down a little bit, but we'll only be here for 5 to 10 minutes. Yeah, thanks, Bridget. And I guess that is going to be a component of the next meeting as well, in a bit more detail. But we have had that message strong and clear that community groups do want to have a bit more of a conversation. We'll take that on board. Councillor Forbes.
I'm just wondering, David, thank you for that. And I think that we will learn some things about how we do some of these things in Zoom situations. But I'm just wondering, more thoughts about the manuhira care. There are people here that obviously feel that the manuhira care process we've been through is not consultation, or they weren't clear that it was consultation for the land and water plan. How are we going to resolve that? Because you could say the same, I suppose, for Cardrona and Ara. I'm just wondering if we have a way of preempting that.
Tom, you're on mute. Do you want to grab this?
Sorry, Councillor. With Cadrona and Arrow, we were very clear that we were not going to notify that as a plan change, but incorporate it into the new land and water plan. And we also were clear, like, look, we've been consulting with you for quite a while. We actually, I think with Cadrona, we ended up having 6 or 7 community meetings. Arrow as well, a lot of community meetings. So I believe from my perspective, there was clarity in the consultation around that. With the Mana Harakia as well, the Mana Harakia process, I think, you know, for the last, since we started working on the land and water plan, which we committed to in, what was it, 2019, we have been trying to get the message out that that regime that we come up with is gonna go into the land and water plan rather than do a plan change to the old plan. So yeah, but I mean, I that doesn't mean that I don't acknowledge that, you know, that message might not have trickled through everywhere.
Maybe I can help, Tom, too. Look, I think the challenge is, of course, that whether we like it or not, we have a limited time frame. In terms of the manuhiri kia, there's been more consultation than there's likely to be for any other rohe in this process. We have, I believe, been really clear, and we've got to the point where there was the science was workshopped in an open workshop, so that was available to the public, and also, of course, to the point where we were ready to put that to councillors, and of course are now back having further discussions and doing further work with the technical advisory group for the manuhiri kia. So there has been an enormous amount of consultation. If I'm correct, Tom, I think there was values and visioning work done in about 2017, and then there was a revisit of that for the land and water plan process as well. That would have been last year or the year before, at the same time that you did the Arrow and Cadrona, from memory. Yeah. So I think what we're seeing tonight is a couple of things, a little bit of confusion about where people fit in terms of FMU. And I think that's really easily resolved, and the interactive map is the way that people can resolve that for themselves. But of course, if people wanted to call us, we would help them through that as well, and explain that. I think Bridget's right. I don't think people in the manuhiri kia probably don't want to do another round. I think everyone is suffering from a bit of fatigue. It seems to me, however, though, what Jenny, is it Jenny, was saying this evening on the chat was that there are some people who have moved into the area and who haven't been a part of the conversation. So that's okay, because while we're not undertaking this kind of consultation and discussion any further for the manuhiri kia, when there is a notification of the land and water plan, those people will absolutely be able to participate in that. If people would like a bit of, if you like, catch up, then I'm sure they could contact us, and staff would be happy to talk about the process to date and the things that we found out around values and vision. So I don't think it's necessarily a huge problem. What I understood was we had some people on the call tonight who were expecting that their part of Otago was included in the Dunstan Rohe. It isn't. But what we didn't have was people from the Dunstan Rohe who were the target of tonight's conversation necessarily having any concerns about the process that we're entering into. So I do think it's a very manageable situation. Possibly we could follow up with Jenny, I think that was her name, but I know Rachel will have it, you know, and assist her a little further so that she can have some comfort around the process that has been undertaken and how people who have not been a part of it until now can be when the land and water plan is notified in 2023. So I don't think it's too difficult to solve. I just think that there was a little confusion tonight. And I also think it is really important that we maintain a focus on the rohe we're working in and not get distracted by the manukira care process, because we've got the rest of Otago's communities that need to have the same opportunity. So it is really important that we solve that for Jenny and anyone else who has a concern, in terms of giving them all the information that they need. But at the same time, we need to make sure that we maintain our focus on the rohe we're now working in. So that would be my advice.
Thanks, Sarah. That answers it really, really well. I'm wondering if at what point, and I think this is a question somebody else has actually put to me, but at what point do these the values and what people think about it end up on the website and available for people to see?
It should be pretty straightforward. The values that we consulted on in the Catlins and in the Upper Lakes should be on the website now. That was actually a process where we had to bring together verbal feedback during the meetings, face-to-face meetings, online feedback and emailed feedback, whereas now our main source is just an online survey. So it should be relatively straightforward. We're working on a template and we can just kind of feed in the results. Obviously, it will be after the consultation, like 2 or 3 weeks after the consultation period ends.
Cheers, Tom.
Sorry, David, can I just jump in there here? I just wanted to follow up on something that Sarah Gardner said. Jenny and I have been private chatting, and I do have her phone number, and we're going to talk tomorrow just so that she's got a bit more clarity around those things. So I did just want to reassure Sarah and councillors that is happening. And the other thing was just pointing out with what Tom was saying about that feedback from the community in this weird pivoted online space being available within a couple of weeks of the close of that, the deadline for that feedback. That's also the hard copy survey as well. So it's the online or the hard copy for those that want to do it that way.
Cool. Cheers, Rachel. So a couple of other questions that have come through. Well, firstly, a point. Thank you, Bridget. Bridget said that tonight is a little bit process heavy and it might be good to pick up a couple of values and discuss with the group as we're going through. So we'll take that on board. I note that there's probably 3 non-ORC people here on the call, so we probably do that another time or for these following meetings. And there's also a question around can community groups request sessions to discuss the plan specifically? Maybe something we cover.
Yeah, sorry, David, can I just pop in here again? There are a number of people that aren't just ORC or iwi still online. So I have been, and the conversation's been with the whole of the group. So I've kept it recording. I think that I can keep it recording until people have got their questions answered, but I just wanted to say that it's still recording because the questions still seem general and for the whole group.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. So something we can pick up for the consecutive meetings. And also a question around how community groups can request sessions to discuss the plan with ORC. I'm thinking community groups and catchment groups. Maybe we can work through that tomorrow and provide that information. I think we've probably exhausted the conversation, learned quite a bit. As you've said, Councillor Forbes, I'll certainly be going back to the drawing board and working out what I can do better. So I really appreciate the attendance of everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ngāti wā.